What if I told you that the most productive thing you can do right now in your career, in your business, your creative life is to stop doing most of what you're currently doing? Not slow down, not reprioritize, not manage your time better. Stop most of it. That sounds extreme, maybe even irresponsible. You have obligations, deliverables, people depend on you. You can't just stop. But here's the thing. Most of what fills your day, the emails, the meetings, the low-level decisions, the small tasks you keep saying yes to because they feel productive, none of it is moving the needle on what actually matters. And deep down, you already know that. Gary Keller, co-founder of one of the largest real estate companies in the world, spent years watching some people achieve extraordinary results while others, equally talented, equally hardworking, never quite got there. And after enough observation, he saw a pattern so simple, it was almost embarrassing. The extraordinary ones weren't doing more. They were doing less, better. They had found their one thing, and they protected it with ferocity that looked from the outside almost like obsession. The Stanford neuroscientists would later confirm what Keller had seen in boardrooms and fields across America. The human brain is structurally incapable of doing two complex things at once. Multitasking is not a skill. It is a myth, and people who practice it most enthusiastically are, according to the data, the worst performers in almost every meaningful category. Welcome to Spark and Hustle. I am Puneet Kaur, and today we're going deep on one of the most deceptively simple and genuinely life-altering ideas in modern performance philosophy: the one thing. What is it? Why it works, why you're not doing it, and how to start today. Let's go. Let's start with a lie you were told. Somewhere along the way, probably in school, maybe at work, almost certainly on a job application, you were told that multitasking is a skill, that the ability to juggle multiple things simultaneously is a mark of capability, efficiency, high performance. Job postings list it as a requirement. Managers praise employees who can handle multiple priorities. We brag about it over dinner. I've been juggling so much lately. Here's what the neuroscience actually says. Multitasking is not real. What we call multitasking is not the simultaneous performance of two tasks. It is the rapid sequential switching between tasks. And each switch carries a cognitive price tag the brain must pay before it can fully re-engage with what came before. Stanford researcher Eyal Ophir led a landmark study in 2009 examining how heavy media multitaskers, people who habitually juggle multiple streams of information, perform on cognitive tests. The result stunned the research team. Heavy multitaskers didn't perform worse on multitasking tests only. They performed worse on everything. Their ability to filter irrelevant information was impaired. Their working memory was weaker. And crucially, in a finding that almost defies logic, they were actually worse at switching between tasks than low multitaskers. The people who multitask the most are the worst at it. Why? Because constant task switching trains the brain to be easily distracted. It weakens the neural pathways responsible for sustained focus. It is, in effect, practice of learning to be unfocused, dressed up as productivity. The American Psychological Association put numbers to the cost. Every time you shift your attention from one task to another, there is a transition cost, a period of cognitive realignment where your brain is neither fully in the old task nor fully in the new one. The transition costs, on average, 20 3 minutes of recovery time before you're operating at peak focus again. Read that again. 23 minutes, every single interruption. Now count how many times your attention is pulled from a focus task on a typical workday. An email notification, a Slack message, a colleague stopping by, a phone buzz, a sudden thought about something you forgot to do. For most professionals, the number is somewhere between 50 and 80 interruptions per day. The math is almost too brutal to face. You may be losing the equivalent of an entire work week every week just to the transition cost of switching your attention. Stanford research confirms the cumulative damage multitasking reduces overall productivity by up to 40%. Not 10, not 5, 40%. And then there's the error rate. A study published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology found that multitasking can double the time it takes to complete a task and significantly increase mistakes. The quality of your thinking degrades, the depth of your analysis suffers, and because you're moving fast and completing things you often don't notice until someone else does. There is also a stress dimension that rarely gets discussed. The cognitive overload of constant task switching triggers the brain's threat response. Cortisol levels rise, the nervous system shifts towards vigilance. And over time, this chronic activation leads to the kind of burnout that isn't fixed by a vacation. It's the kind that requires months of deliberate recovery. But here's what may be the most disturbing finding of all. The people who are most addicted to multitasking, who check their phones constantly, who always have 15 tabs open, who treat distraction as the baseline state of work, believe they're good at it. They feel productive. They feel busy. They feel like they're covering a lot of ground. They're almost always wrong. And this brings us to the Stoic lens. Epictetus, in the discourses, taught that the key to freedom was to understand what is and is not within our power. What we give our attention to, he argued, is perhaps the most fundamental expression of our freedom. Not our circumstances, not what happens when others demand of us, but where we direct our minds. Marcus Aurelius, governing an empire, wrote this to himself in his private journals. Confine yourself to the present, not the present email, not the present notification, not the present meeting that's bleeding into the next meeting, the present task, the present moment, the present thing. For Marcus, focus was not a productivity strategy. It was a philosophical discipline, the practice of giving yourself fully to what was in front of you, because fragmented attention was a form of fragmented living. This is the first truth of the episode. Multitasking is not a skill. It is a habit of self-sabotage, dressed in the language of efficiency, stealing your capacity for kind of focused work that actually changes things. Gary Keller's central insight, the one that anchors his book and has influenced millions of leaders, entrepreneurs, and performers around the world, begins with a deceptively single question. What's the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? Listen to the question again. What's the one thing that I can do such that by doing it, everything else will become easier or unnecessary? Not what are my priorities, not what's the most important, not even what should I focus on first. What's the one thing such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? It's a question that demands genuine strategic thinking. It refuses you the permission to get off the hook with everything is important, because in any domain at any given time, there's always one thing that has more leverage than everything else combined. Keller calls this the domino principle. In 1983, physicist Lorne Whitehead demonstrated that a single domino can topple another domino up to 50% larger than itself. That means a chain of dominoes, each one 50% larger than the last, starting from a domino just 2 inches tall, would, by the 57th domino, reach the distance from Earth to the moon. Extraordinary success works the same way. It doesn't come from doing 100 things competently. It comes from identifying the right sequence of high leverage actions, the right dominoes, and knocking them down one at a time. The one thing is always the first domino. This connects directly to the concept that Greg McCubbin introduced in Essentialism. I think I butchered his last name, McKeown. His observation that the word priority entered the English language in the 1400s as a singular noun. It was the very first thing, one thing by definition. It wasn't until the 20th century that we manufactured the plural priorities, as if we could have 5 or 10 or, multiple first things simultaneously. You cannot. Language hid the contradiction, but the reality has always enforced the law. There's always one thing that matters most. The question is whether you're honest enough to name it and disciplined enough to do it before everything else. Now, Keller operates in 2 time scales. One is, of course, short term, another is long term. When it comes to long terms, what is that one thing that represents your purpose, the deepest expression of why you're on earth? Why are you building? What gets you up in the morning? What keeps you going when the work is hard? That is identity level clarity. It's the question that points you towards your life's work rather than your current job. Short term is, what is the one thing I can do today, this morning, this hour, this day that will move me most meaningfully toward the long-term purpose? When these two align, something shifts. Suddenly, the daily work isn't grinding through a task list, it's the expression of something larger. Every focused hour becomes the investment in the life you're actually building. Cal Newport in Deep Work frames this differently but arrives at the same place. Newport argues that the ability to perform deep work, cognitively demanding tasks performed in a state of distraction-free concentration, is becoming simultaneously rare and more valuable in the modern economy. As shallow work, email admin, reactive coordination expands to fill the available time of most professionals, people who can protect hours for deep, focused work on high-leverage tasks will increasingly produce the results that matter, not because they're smarter, but because they're less distracted. Newport's stark conclusion, the people who cultivate deep focus on a core skill will disproportionately thrive because they will produce things that matter in a world where most people are too scattered to produce anything that lasts. Keller, McKeown, Newport, 3 different frameworks, one convergent truth. Focus is not a productivity tactic. It is the fundamental mechanism of extraordinary achievement. And here's where the Stoic tradition deepens the argument in a way that productivity authors don't fully reach. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." The power to focus, to choose what occupies the mind, is the most sovereign act available to a human being. Not the power to control outcomes, not the power to avoid difficulty, but the power to decide where to direct the mind's energy. In Stoic terms, this is the exercise of logos, reason, the governing faculty. To scatter attention is to abdicate the highest human capacity. To focus is to exercise it. So this is the second truth. The one thing is not time management technique. It is a philosophy of sovereign attention. The decision to give your best self completely to what matters most. If focus is this powerful, if the research is this clear, if the philosophy is this compelling, why doesn't everyone do it? Why are most people's days still a fragmented scramble of reactive tasks, low priority meetings, and the gnawing feeling that they spent 8 hours and moved nothing forward? The answer lives in psychology. And it's more uncomfortable than the productivity books are willing to go. Reason one, busyness feels like progress. The human brain has a deep reward circuitry around completion. Every time you finish a task, any task, regardless of its actual importance, you get this small dopamine release. The inbox item ticked, the quick reply sent, the status update filed. These micro completions feel like productivity. They feel like forward motion, but they are, in Keller's framework, the noise that drowns out the signal. They give you the neurochemical sensation of progress while stealing the time and attention that real progress requires. The person who answers 40 emails in the morning feels busy. The person who spent the same morning on one high leverage project that could transform their career, their business, or their life has actually moved. But they have only one thing to show, and one thing can feel dangerously close to not enough. Reason two, the fear of being wrong. Committing to a single priority is a bet. It's a declaration. This matters more than everything else. And if you're wrong, if you focus on the wrong thing, if the project fails, if the strategy doesn't work, the failure is a concentrated risk and it is very visible. Spreading your attention across many priorities is psychologically safer. If nothing works, nothing fails completely, you always have the defense. I was doing a lot of things. But Keller is relentless on this point. The fear of concentrated commitment is precisely what keeps most people in mediocrity. Extraordinary results require extraordinary focus, which requires the willingness to be wrong about what matters, and then adjust rather than never committing at all. Reason number three, our environment is engineered against us. This one is not our fault and is also the hardest to solve. The modern information environment is not neutral. Every app on your phone, every platform you use, every notification system you interact with has been designed by teams of engineers and behavioral psychologists whose explicit goal is to capture and hold your attention. The attention economy, the term coined by Nobel laureate Herbert Simon, describes a world in which human attention has become a scarce resource worth billions of dollars and where the most powerful technology companies on earth compete for every minute of it. Your distraction is their revenue. Your focus is their loss. Stanford's research on heavy media multitaskers found that prolonged exposure to high distraction environments actually rewires the brain, weakening the neural circuits responsible for sustained attention and strengthening those associated with novelty seeking and distraction. The brain adapts to the environment, and the modern environment environment is aggressively training your brain to be unfocused, this is not pessimism. It's a clear-eyed diagnosis. But once you understand that your distraction is engineered, that it is not a character flaw or lack of willpower, you can begin to design your environment effectively and differently. Reason number 4, we confuse equality of tasks with equality of importance. Most of us operate on an implicit assumption. All the items on the to-do list are roughly equal in importance, differentiated only by urgency. So we work through the list in order to, make us feel okay about what's most pressing, which is usually what's the loudest, most recent, or most likely to produce a complaint if ignored. Keller's framework also dismantles this assumption with one of his most powerful concepts, the 80-20 principle applied to tasks. The Pareto principle, originally articulated by Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto and popularized in modern business thinking, holds that roughly 20% of inputs produce 80% of outputs. Applied to your work, roughly 20% of your tasks produce 80% of your results. But Keller pushes further. He asks you to keep applying the Pareto filter, that 20%. Apply the filter again with the 20% of 20%. Produces the most results. Keep going until you arrive through honest analysis at the single most leveraged thing on your list. This is almost always a thing you're avoiding. The hard thing, the uncomfortable thing, the thing that requires the most from you and produces the most in return. So this is the third truth. You don't focus because your brain is wired for comfort. Your environment is engineered for distraction, and the culture rewards the appearance of busyness over the discipline of depth. Overcoming this requires design, not willpower. Let's get practical, because philosophy without practice is just entertainment. Think about the focusing question, and it is deceptively so simple, right? That what we need to think about is, for our career, right? Let's take the career first. What is the one thing that I can do in my professional life such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary, right? Depending on who you are, what you do, it may be building a system that removes you from daily firefighting. It could be a system that allows you to invest time in strategy, relationships, and growth. That one thing, a documented, scalable operational system, makes every other leadership challenge easier. For an entrepreneur building a brand, it might be creating a body of work so consistently excellent that word of mouth becomes a primary growth engine, removing the need for paid execution. The one thing at career level is almost always something that requires sustained, focused effort over months or years. It is rarely urgent. It is almost always important. And because it is never on fire, it is always the first thing to be sacrificed when the reactive demands arrive. Think about your daily schedule. Keller recommends what he calls time blocking, but not in the way most people practice it. His vision is non-negotiable and top of the day. Before email, before meetings, before the day's noise has a chance to establish itself. Block 2 to 4 hours every morning for your one thing. Treat it like a surgery. You do not cancel. You do not interrupt. You do not allow visitors. This block is the most important appointment in your calendar. Not because it feels urgent, but because it is the appointment with the future version of yourself. Everything else, the meetings, the emails, the admin tasks, goes into the hours that remain. These are the hours when your cognitive resources are already depleted, when the reactive demands of the day are the loudest, when the shallow work is appropriate precisely because deep work is no longer accessible. The sequence matters. Your best mental resource need to go to your most important work, not your inbox. Merck, the pharmaceutical giant, put this into practice by instituting deep work protocols for their research teams, dedicated single task periods with no meetings and no digital interruptions. The result? Their teams developed patent-worthy innovations 28% faster than control groups working under standard conditions. Thinking about your personal life, right? This isn't only for professional environment. It has equal power to health, relationships, and inner life. So what's the one thing you can do for your health such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier? For many people, the honest answer is sleep. Not more exercise, not a cleaner diet, those matter, but the foundational lever is recovery. When sleep is protected, everything else, cognitive performance, emotional regulations, physical energy, willpower improves. And this is my one thing that I need to improve on. What's the one thing that you can do in your most important relationship? Such by doing it, everything else becomes easier. For most people who have examined this honestly, the answer is presence. Not more gifts, not more activities. Presence, genuine, phone away, fully there presence is the foundation on which everything else in a relationship is built. These are not easy answers. They require honesty about what you're actually doing versus what would actually work. But that's the point, right? That's the whole point of this episode. The focusing question doesn't give any easy answers. It gives you the true ones. And that's where Greg McKeown's essentialism contributes something crucial here, the understanding that every yes is a no to something else. Every time you say yes to a meeting, a project, a request, a commitment, you are simultaneously saying no to whether you would have done with that time. The question isn't whether to say no. You're always saying no to something. The question is whether you're making the choice deliberately or just by default. The prescription from this book, Essentialism, is radical selectivity, not yes and or yes but a genuine, thoughtful, considered evaluation of whether this request serves the one thing, and if it doesn't, a clear, kind, firm no. This is perhaps the most difficult skill to develop in organizational life. The social pressure to be agreeable, to seem collaborative, to avoid disappointing people is real and persistent. But there's nothing unambiguous about this. The cost of saying yes to the inessential is paid by the essential. Every yes to something small is paid with a no to something that matters. Epictetus, again, is surgical on this. Back to Stoicism. He says, if someone is able to show me that what I think or do is not right, I will happily change. But if not, where is the difficulty in sticking to what I think is right? The willingness to hold to what is essential, even when social pressure pushes towards inessential, is a Stoic practice. It is also, according to every serious study of high achievement, a prerequisite for extraordinary results. One example that comes to mind is Michael Phelps. There's a reason he's one of the most decorated Olympians. For 7 years, he took no day off. He was saying yes to his one thing by saying no to all the little things, the birthday parties, events, this or that or the other. That's the choice he made, and the results we see are extraordinary. There's a deeper layer to our conversation that most of what we read, most of what we discuss doesn't actually touch. It is about changing our behavior without changing our identity, right? So if we try to change our behavior today, it may last a week, it may last a month, but it's a short-term strategy. You can time block for a week, you can protect your mornings for a month, but if you still believe at the level of identity that you're someone who handles a lot of things, that being pulled in multiple directions is simply the nature of your role, your life, your ambition, the old patterns will return. The shift that actually changes everything is an identity shift from I am someone who manages my priorities to I am someone who protects what matters most. That is not a small change. It touches how you introduce yourself, how you evaluate requests, how you feel about saying no, how you measure a good day. James Clear in Atomic Habits, a book we've referenced to in previous episodes, argues that identity-based change is the most durable form of change. Not, I want to focus more, but I am a focused person. Not, I should do my one thing first, but I am someone who starts every day with what matters most. When the behavior flows from identity, willpower becomes largely irrelevant. You don't white knuckle your way through distraction every morning. You simply do what people like you do. Stoics understand this in the language of character. It's the ethos, the stable disposition from which virtuous action flows. Virtue for Stoics was not an occasional heroic effort. It was practiced orientation, a habit of the soul that shapes every choice without requiring deliberation. Focus in the Stoic framework is not something you try to have. It's something you practice until it becomes who you are. I definitely want to talk about one person I admire a lot is Steve Jobs. He is one of history's most cited examples of obsessive focus. He was notorious for saying no. No, not just to distractions, but to entire product lines, partnerships, market opportunities. When he returned to Apple in 1997, the company had dozens of products across a confusing sprawl of categories. His first act was to eliminate almost all of them, to reduce Apple's portfolio to 4 products. From that disciplined subtraction came the iMac, the iPod, the iPhone, and the iPad. A sustained sequence of world-altering innovations delivered by a company that had decided with a ruthless clarity what it was and was not going to do. Jobs didn't succeed despite saying no. He succeeded because of it. Now, that's our fourth truth. Focus is not a habit you add to your life. It is an identity you build. And the building requires the daily practice of saying no to the good so you can say yes to the essential. Like Seneca wrote, "To be everywhere is to be nowhere." 4 words written 2,000 years ago, more accurate today than they have ever been. Now, at the cost of this omnipresence is not just productivity, it is presence, the felt experience of being alive fully in the actual moments of your actual life. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "It is enough to do good now, even if I won't remember it." This is the man who mastered the present tense. This one thing here now, the highest expression of the one thing framework is not a productivity technique. It is a way of inhabiting your life with enough presence, enough honesty, and enough courage to give your full self to what matters the most. Not divided, not diluted, not hedged across 100 commitments, none of which receive your best. Full commitment. The most extraordinary people in every field, in science, in art, in business, in sports, in philosophy, are not those who did most things. They were those who found their thing and gave it everything. Darwin and his theory, Hemingway and his prose, Jobs and his products, Marcus Aurelius and his philosophy, each of them in their own domain and their own era practiced the same discipline, the disciplined, courageous daily choice to give their best self to one thing and to let that one thing speak for their entire life. We don't need to be Darwin. We don't need to be Steve Jobs. We need to just answer one question honestly today. What is the one thing I can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? And then go do that. Book recommendation. The book title is The One Thing, The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results by Gary Keller and Jay Papasan. If there's one book that cuts through the noise of productivity genre with genuine philosophical weight, it is this one. 2 passages to carry with you from this book. One is success is built sequentially. It's one thing at a time. And this one, perhaps, my opinion, that it's the most honest thing in the book is the things which matter most must never be at the mercy of the things which matter the least. Let me repeat this one. The things which matter the most must never be at the mercy of the things which matter the least. The one question, that's the whole episode, right? What's the one thing you can do such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? You don't have to answer it perfectly. You just have to start answering it honestly. And then this is the part most people skip. You have to actually do the thing. Not someday, not after the inbox is clear, not when things slow down. Today, this morning, this evening, this night, before anything else. The science is behind you. The philosophy is behind you. The only thing standing between you and the focused, high leverage, fully committed version of your work and your life is the next decision you make about where your attention goes. Make it count. I will post all the study links, the workbook, and full show notes on the episode. Subscribe wherever you listen. And if this episode gave you clarity, leave a 5-star review. If it helps more people, do share the work. And until next time, stay bold, stay soft, and keep going.